The paper bag slid from my hand before my mind caught up with my eyes. Glass shattered, marinara streaked across the white tile like a crime scene, and for 3 stunned heartbeats, I stood in my own doorway, with my keys still dangling. My mother was fluffing the throw pillows I had placed with care. My sister Liana, measuring tape in hand, was sizing up the room I had carefully turned into a small home office. 3 days earlier, I'd shown them photos of my cottage. I had not shared the address. When I asked how they got in, Mom waved airily and said she'd made herself a copy of my key yesterday when I stopped by to congratulate you. The memory snapped into focus, her asking to use the bathroom during a very short visit, her purse conveniently left behind my key ring carelessly set on the counter. The betrayal felt so old it was almost familiar. I took the spare key from Liana's fingers and told them to leave. Mom's voice sharpened. Dad later boomed over the phone, and both of them invoked the same chorus I'd heard all my life: family first. I slid the deadbolt and felt it click inside my chest. By morning, my phone served up the first proof that this wasn't a sudden whim. A Facebook post from 3 weeks earlier, before I had even closed on the cottage, showed Liana's 3 children posed in their cramped room, with the caption, "Kids are finally getting a bigger place soon. Blessed. Family first." In the comments, she assigned bedrooms that did not exist within a home she had never seen, claiming the blue room with the bay window for Ellie and the room across the hall for Jack and Tyler. Mom chimed in about keeping the 3rd bedroom as a guest room for Aunt Carol. I was still rereading their plans when a group text from Dad arrived accidentally, including me. "Don't worry about Posey's tantrum," Mom wrote. "She'll give in once you're settled. She always does." Those words, "she always does," rang like a bell I had learned to obey. The invitation to dinner came the next evening at 7:00 p.m. and dressed itself as reconciliation. The table was set with Mom's good china, the seating arranged like a courtroom, my parents and Liana on one side, an empty chair opposite. Dad slid a manila folder toward me and called it the perfect solution. Inside were printouts of 5-bedroom homes near Liana's kids' school, each listing annotated with cheerful notes like "perfect playroom" and "good backyard for the kids." Mom smiled and said they'd already spoken to my bank about how simple it would be to move my mortgage. My mouth went dry. Liana explained which furniture of mine would have to go to make room for the bunk beds. When her husband Mark arrived late, he casually reserved the left garage bay for his truck and suggested I park on the street. It struck me then how easily they spoke about dividing space in a house they had not paid for, as if my life were a storage unit I might rent them at a discount. I asked my parents if they had contacted my office already, knowing the answer. Dad offered that he'd spoken with Robert about my family crisis, hinting there'd be flexibility for me to help with the move. The old script unfolded moral admonitions, strategic tears, and neighbors' opinions brandished as weapons. I sat with the sting of memory, Liana's 11th birthday carnival, my store-bought cake that same year, the rent I paid to live in their basement, while they covered Liana's tuition, the cars they co-signed for her while I learned bus routes. The pattern unspooled like a long, strong rope. I placed my napkin beside the untouched plate, stood, and heard my own voice sound calm and foreign as I said, "Watch me not help." I left them to the china and the annotated listings and drove home in silence, my phone humming with demands I refused to read. In the days that followed, the pressure shifted from persuasion to performance. Liana posted a photo of her kids on a pull-out sofa and accused me of abandoning family to an audience of churchwomen and classmates' parents. Mom shared pictures of my home and wrote about the perils of forgetting where you came from. Pastor Williams appeared at my door at 11:30 a.m. with a Bible and a speech. I declined through the wood. My 3rd grade teacher texted to say she'd raised 4 children in half my square footage. I set the phone face down and gripped the counter. I called my bank about a missing mortgage statement and learned my parents had asked to forward my financial mail to their house for safekeeping. I denied the request and felt my breath shorten. A message from the Homeowners Association accused me of running a business from home, an anonymous complaint that required a formal reply. That week, I changed every password, set up a mail hold, and installed cameras that lit up my phone when anyone approached my doors. I began a simple ledger: the date, the incident, the screenshot, the recording. The methodical act steadied me. A loaf of warm bread appeared on my desk with a note from Marcy in accounting. "Sorry, I blabbed about your new place. Not everyone thinks you're wrong." The small kindness cracked something open. That same evening, arriving home with my guard finally lowered, I found Liana's SUV in my driveway and silhouettes moving in my living room. Cold anger replaced dread. I stayed in my car and called the police. When my family spilled onto my porch to perform their outrage for the neighbors, I showed the officer footage of their entry with a copied key. I heard myself say I did not care what people thought. I cared what I thought. The officer's warning about trespassing felt like a line drawn on a map, the first of many. That night, I slept with the deadbolt turned and the ledger open on my kitchen table, one steady column of facts under a quiet lamp. The silence lasted barely 3 days. Then my parents showed up at my workplace claiming there had been a family emergency. Mom dabbed dry eyes with a tissue, and Dad demanded to see me telling the receptionist that my sister had been in an accident. My phone, still warm in my pocket, displayed a text from Liana about school lunches time stamped 2 minutes earlier. I stepped into the lobby, faced my parents, and said clearly, "I just heard from her. She's fine." The tissue dropped, the mask slipped, and I announced to everyone in earshot that my family had lied about a medical emergency to disrupt my workday. Security walked them out while my boss placed a hand on my shoulder and asked only if I was all right. Later that night, Liana launched a GoFundMe page titled "Housing Crisis, Help My Children Have a Home" with my photograph splashed across it. I reported the unauthorized use, and the campaign vanished by morning. My father's voicemail afterward shifted from rage to a confession he hadn't meant to make. "We had it all planned out," he snarled. "We were going to move in whether you liked it or not." I saved the recording with a grim satisfaction. My lawyer friend Dave drafted a cease and desist letter. He told me, "They're counting on your guilt. They've weaponized it your whole life." I delivered the certified envelope to my mother's hand, watched her wounded expression, and heard her whisper, "You'll regret this." For the first time, I did not believe her. Days of quiet followed a silence so rare it felt like stolen time. I almost allowed myself to hope. Then, Thursday came. My security camera sent a notification, Mom on my porch in daylight, trying one key, then another, then another. When they all failed, she reached into her purse for what appeared to be a fourth. My stomach lurched as I watched the footage. This was not over. This was escalation. I turned my home into a fortress. Motion-activated lights reinforced locks and cameras that streamed directly to my phone. I filed every incident with meticulous detail texts, voicemails, social media posts, and now video evidence. My therapist, Judith, reminded me, facts, not emotions. Boundaries, not arguments. My coworkers became an unexpected wall of defense. When Liana appeared at my office with swollen eyes and dramatic sighs, Marcy intercepted her at the front desk. Others joined me at lunch, and their silent presence was enough to send her away. The contrast was searing. Strangers respected my boundaries more than family ever had. The next escalation came wrapped in false sweetness. One afternoon, I came home to find Mom in my kitchen, a cherry pie on the counter. "It's your favorite," she said, though it had always been Liana's. She slid glossy listings across the island, 5-bedroom homes, triple the cost of my cottage. "We've already toured 3 of them," she explained. "You'll have the master bedroom. Liana's family will take the mother-in-law suite. We can make this work." My calm reply surprised even me. "You toured houses in my name?" Her eyes flashed when I asked about finances, and her voice dropped. "If you're going to be difficult, we can contest the ownership. You couldn't possibly have afforded this place without family help." I returned with a folder thick with evidence, rent checks, loan records, birthday comparisons, and video of her and Liana trying keys at my door. She paled as I laid each page down. Then I handed her something else, a letter from my company's new Arizona branch. "I accepted the offer last week. I'm selling the cottage and moving next month." Her relief flickered until I added, "I'm not running away. I'm running toward a life where I'm valued." They called a family meeting that weekend, a grand gathering meant to shame me into compliance. The driveway overflowed with cars. My aunt, my cousins, even my grandmother filled the living room, seated in a semicircle as if for a trial. Dad began with a forced smile, ready to unveil their solution. I interrupted, placing my own folder on the coffee table. "I have an announcement." I showed them the listing for my cottage with its red for sale banner. "I've accepted a job in Arizona. I'm moving next month." Liana shrieked. "But what about us? Where are we supposed to go?" I answered evenly. "The same place you already live." Dad's face turned scarlet. "This is how you abandon family." I passed copies of my documentation to my grandmother and aunt. They read aloud the disparities: my rent versus Liana's free apartment, my loans versus her tuition, the security footage of attempted break-ins. My grandmother covered her mouth. My aunt whispered, "You made her pay rent during college." Dad snapped. It built character, but his bluster faltered as others murmured. For the first time, the myth cracked. As I left, my phone lit with messages not from my parents, but from extended relatives offering support, asking questions, admitting doubts they'd long buried. Within days, my realtor called. "You've got an offer. 20,000 over asking cash, 30-day close." I accepted without hesitation. When she asked if I wanted to keep the spare keys, I told her to discard them all. I would never need them again. A year later, I woke in a sunlit Arizona home filled with furniture. I had chosen curtains I had picked, and a garden of herbs and marigolds I'd always been told were too common. Friends gathered around my table on my birthday, with apple pie my true favorite. No one demanded space or sacrifice, only laughter and celebration. On my wall hung photographs of my own, Making Mountains colleagues, a bold red front door. Not a single picture included my family. And for once, that absence did not ache. It felt like air. The move to Arizona closed one chapter and opened another. I sold my cottage within a week, boxed up the pieces of my life, and left the town that had witnessed every compromise, every manipulation. When the moving truck pulled away and I turned the key in the lock one last time, I felt a mixture of grief and relief. The cottage had been mine, but it had also been a battleground. Arizona was a clean slate. The first months were filled with small but meaningful freedoms. I arranged my furniture exactly as I wanted, without someone shifting chairs when my back was turned. I painted the front door the shade of red I had always imagined, but never dared. My herb garden thrived in the desert sun, basil and rosemary, standing tall where once roses had been imposed. When I cut into an apple pie for my birthday, surrounded by colleagues who had become friends, the taste was sweeter than any chocolate cake I'd endured for the sake of my sister's preferences. For decades, I had mistaken endurance for love, sacrifice for belonging. Now, each decision made for myself became its own quiet rebellion. My family's attempts did not end with the move. They called from unknown numbers, sent long emails, filled with accusations, even tried to contact my employer with complaints of family abandonment. But distance gave me leverage. I documented everything, saved every voicemail, and let Dave's firm replies handle what I once would have shouldered alone. Facts, not emotions, Judith reminded me, and with each ignored bait, I felt my spine grow stronger. Support came from unexpected corners. Cousins reached out privately, confessing they had suspected the favoritism for years, but never dared say so aloud. Aunt Susan asked if I was all right, her voice hesitant as though realizing how much she had overlooked. Even former neighbors sent quiet messages of solidarity, telling me they admired the courage it must have taken to stand up against the tide. What once felt like isolation began to look like clarity. My parents and Liana remained in their cycle of entitlement, but the rest of the family no longer saw me as the villain. The story had cracked open, and the truth seeped through. At work, my voice carried weight I had never known. When a new engineer, Jared, hesitated to share an idea under a manager's dismissive tone, I stepped in. "Let's hear him out," I said. His approach ended up saving days of testing time. The gratitude in his eyes mirrored the reflection I once caught of myself, small, diminished, afraid to take up space. Helping him find his footing reminded me how far I had come. Boundaries were not just walls. They were foundations on which to build something better. Michael entered my life gently, almost unexpectedly. A landscape architect with a patient smile, he respected my boundaries as if they were sacred ground. After years of having my space invaded, his quiet attentiveness felt foreign at first, then natural. He asked, never assumed. When we planned a hiking trip one Saturday morning, his text simply read, "Still on that single question," carried more respect than years of my family's demands. I realized then how starved I had been for that simple courtesy. One evening, sorting through my phone gallery, I paused at an old family photo. We were all huddled together, smiling for the camera, but I was slightly out of frame as always. My smile strained my body, angled to fit into a space that was never meant for me. For years, I had kept those pictures as proof of belonging. Now, staring at them in my quiet living room, I pressed delete. In their place, I uploaded a photo of my red door. My door. My life. My choice. When I thought of my parents, I no longer felt the sharp edge of guilt. Instead, I recognized the truth: they had disappointed me far more consistently than I had ever disappointed them. They valued control over connection, appearances over affection, and yet I no longer needed their approval. The peace I had built, the friendships that blossomed, the respect I earned, these were the markers of a life reclaimed. 1 year after the marinara shattered on my kitchen tile, I stood in my Arizona home with sunlight streaming across my own photographs and herbs flourishing in my garden. Friends gathered around my table raising glasses not to sacrifice, but to chosen family. As we toasted to building homes and lives that reflected who we truly were, I realized the lesson at the heart of my story. Boundaries are not betrayals. They are declarations of worth. Saying no is not rejection, it is self-respect. And sometimes the family we are born into cannot see us clearly, but that does not mean we must remain invisible. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever struggled between obligation and independence, I hope you find the courage to choose yourself. Because when you do, you create the space for a life that is wholly beautifully your own. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below about the boundaries you've learned to protect. Your voice matters, and your story might give someone else the strength to take their first step.